So this is my place. This is my first year doing pixels. Had about 6,000 pixels this year, which was a few more than I thought I was going to have for my first year in. It was a fair bit of work, but I was very happy with the result. I mean, it took the best part of 9 months to build it all, but seeing people's reactions when they saw the display was certainly worth it. So I just thought what I'd do is do a quick 5 or 10 minute video, sort of a walkthrough of my display, talk about what I learnt, which was a lot, so I won't tell you all, some of the gotchas and some of the specifics of my display that you guys might find interesting. These garden outlines I've got here are just made out of 25mm electrical conduit that I've just painted black and used a drill press to put pixels in every 3 inches, and that's been really effective. So those house effects that kind of span from one side of the house to the other look really good on these garden outlines, and they go right around the garden beds here and back down, and you might be able to see it. I've got some on the other side of the driveway as well. So to mount these nodes here in the PVC conduit, I've just got these little blocks of wood, probably about 6 inches, and what I've done is I've just used a zip tie to secure that using a screw down zip tie mount into that bit of wood, and those have held together really good through the season. There was some warping initially, so I actually had to go and put a few more in a couple of weeks into December, but you wouldn't even know now, they look really good. So this is one of my 180 degree mini trees that I've got sitting up the side of the house here, looking out into the yard. Again, I've got everything sitting on aggregate, so I had to get a bit creative with the mounting. So I just mounted a wooden stake diagonally into the ground and used that to support it. Really not going anywhere, right? There's not too much weight behind it, so it wobbles in the wind, but she's good. I generally take pride in my lawn. However, it's taken quite a beating over the last month. And I guess that's in part due to, initially I was quite resistant or hesitant to water too frequently. I didn't want to risk the strips getting wet and having to replace them, because I read everywhere that strips are a real pain. I've actually had no problems with these. So no issues whatsoever with the strips. And I've had quite a few kids coming up and grabbing on them and pushing the trees over. So fortunately, I've not had to do any repairs. I do have these wires running through the yard for the spiral trees. Kids actually just loved hopping over them, jumping over them. Fortunately, I had a fair bit of slack in those cables, so it was actually not too bad. But when I do bring this display down tomorrow, I'm just going to check them all out, make sure all of the solder joints and whatnot are all still pretty good. But yeah, certainly for next year, if I could try to dig a trench under this lawn and maybe run them to that little flower bed there where that tree is, that might be a better option, just to stop it being a trip hazard. Fortunately, no one got hurt this year. So again, these stars that I've got, I didn't want to drill into any of the face brick, so I've just got it hanging down with rope, and you can it's really noticeable now. You can see the white rope and the black cable, but during the night with the pixels lit up, you actually don't notice at all. You really can't see any of the wires or any of the rope, which makes it really, really good during the night. Not so good during the day, but it keeps people in suspense, I guess, as to what your house is going to look like after dark. So I've got those 3 there. I've got another one here, another coral wreath, all mounted in exactly the same way. So just that rope hanging down. And on the other side of this wall, I've got some bricks that I'm using just to mount those. So on the other side, I'll show you actually. And then you can see up here, there's some stars here as well. Again, mounted in the exact same way. So just that white rope, and I've actually just tied that to that window frame there. So all of the window frames are 2-inch spacing. White PVC to match the window frames. And again, mostly, for the most part, I'll show you over here, using those silicone zip tie mounts. So again, you can see up here, painted the same color as the render and just zip tied that whole frame. I had to put one in the middle here just because it was wobbling, but same concept. So the only exception to all those silicone zip tie mounts is this window here. So I really didn't want anything to fall down from the second story. So what I've done here is I've just drilled in, because it's so high up you don't even notice it, just some eye bolts into the render there, and use that, and just put zip ties into those just to make sure that the silicone wasn't going to rip off in high winds and come crashing down. You know, because it'd be one thing to, you know, rip the controller off the board or rip the controller down to the ground floor, but it's certainly another thing if people go getting injured because this kind of stuff falls. You know, certainly don't want anyone getting hurt as a result of my Christmas display. So this is my Chroma Santa, again mounted in the same way as all of the other Coro props hanging from the house, with a bit of rope here using zip ties. And I've also got him mounted and secured at the base as well. So Santa's actually quite heavy, has a fair bit of weight behind him, and he really blows around in the wind. So fortunately, with Santa sitting against this PVC pipe, it doesn't bang on the window, but it does move around. So what I've done is very primitive mounting on the base. So obviously I couldn't really secure anything to the aggregate. So I've just got a couple of pavers which I've zip tied. I seem to use zip ties for almost everything in this display, just to make sure that he doesn't wobble around too much. Doesn't get caught in a gust of wind and ends up in the neighbour's yard or anything like that. So again, all of these props that do hang from the house, just secured at the base with a couple of bricks just to make sure they don't wobble around too much. You can see here my extensive wire runs. Well, not too extensive, I guess. And I had so many kids hopping through the yard, so you know, jumping in between all of these chroma presents here, running through my hedges, between the roses. I mean, in a way, it was really cool to see the kids so excited about the display. So hopefully I can do something next year just to stop the kids running through the garden beds. You know, happy for them to go nuts on the lawn, but don't really want them going through the garden beds, especially with all those wires behind there. The aggregate's really quite rough and would probably graze up some kids' knees pretty good if they tripped over. So I just want to avoid them going on the aggregate where all the cables are if I can. I've got these icicles as well hanging from the top gutter, really effective. It's really good at night. So I've got the 432 drop pixels, which look alright, but I think for next year I'll probably just go consistent 4-inch drops, and then that way I can just modify all of the effects and change the look of those pixels in X-Lights in each sequence, because I found that I was kind of limited in what I could do given the pixel spacing and the consistency of the drops for all the different effects. So yeah, certainly next year it'll be 4 pixels down for every drop. So I've got these PVC outlines around the sides of my house, or the perimeter of the house. They're at 3-inch spacing, again drilled PVC that I've just painted to match the same colour as the render colour on the house. We've had some really hot weather in Perth, and you can see how it's just warped. So it really did that, I think, 2 weeks into December. I didn't want to put any silicone zip tie mounts at this height here, because this is obviously kind of eye height, and I didn't really want any noticeable impact on any of my house. So for the mounting, you can see this one just down here. It's the silicone zip tie mount, which again I've painted to the same color as the render and just put a zip tie through it. Really effective way of mounting these conduits around the house. So you can see there's a couple of cables there. So I run everything from the top of the roof there. I've got a controller box, which I'll show you in a moment, and down into the yard where I've got these remote expansion boards. So we're upstairs now. This is just in the retreat. This is my main controller. So this runs the main house props, as well as all of the remote distro boards that I've got scattered through the yard. So that's the enclosure here. So it's my F16 again. The main one that I use, so I use this to control all of the remote distro boards that I've got scattered through the yard. This one does have cooling because it does have two power supplies in it, so pretty important that I have cooling. It's sitting on a ColourBond roof, so through the afternoon it does actually get quite hot when I first turn it on, just because of the ColourBond. So we can see here there's lots of wires everywhere. I was telling you before about how I've mounted all of those props on the front of my house using that rope, and you can see here I've just used bricks just to secure everything down, or bricks and pavers, and that's worked really, really well. So I didn't want to go drilling into the ColourBond or the blade wall unnecessarily. And mounting these icicles, just with the Bunnings, I just found these very, very simple clips here just for hanging these icicle lights off. I was hoping at first that I'd be able to just hang them off the top bit. Probably, oh yeah, I'll zoom in on one. Hoping that I could hang it off that top bit there. Wasn't going to be the case, so instead I just had to use the bottom little loop that's there. And as you might be able to see on that one, just looping it through that little bottom hook that they have there. It's worked out well. A couple have fallen down, so I'll probably make sure I use extra next year. Maybe every couple of pixels I'll put one of those, just so if it does fall down it's not as noticeable because you've got that extra those extra clips. So I was a little bit concerned about crime, you know, not people going and stealing things to go and set up their own pixel displays, but more people just vandalizing what I have, right? So people maybe, you know, stomping on the spiral trees or kicking over the chroma trees. Really wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, we're not really in a dodgy area, but you know, this type of petty crime can happen anywhere. So I've actually left the spiral trees out every night. I've left these chroma trees in as well. I've left them out as well. But I have brought the Tune 2 sign out, which is just a TV screen mounted in a black frame. So one of the other things with these trees is we really wanted to make sure that we could still use the garage through the season. So, you know, we've only got a single car, so the mega tree over here didn't pose an issue for us with moving the cars around. But what we needed to do was make sure that we could move these chroma trees here any day that we needed to move the car, which was in fact most days. So what I've done is I've just used landscaping chalk, so you can see the yellow dots here. And these yellow dots just make it really easy for me to line up where everything needs to go each night, just so all of the effects, you know, like the whole house type effects that, you know, go from, you know, one side of your house to the other, look consistent, and that the trees are in the exact same space or same spot every single night. I used the Jadiation designer to develop the actual boards, and then I just went to this plastics place we have here in Perth to get the boards manufactured, or to get the boards cut actually, and I just drilled the holes in them myself. So this is a CG 1500 box with a couple of vents in it. I don't actually have any cooling or any fans in my CG 1500s. They don't get that hot with only one power supply in them, so I haven't had a problem all season with that. So this is my Tune 2 sign. It's just a Samsung TV, an old, well, actually it's not even a TV, actually it's an old computer monitor, I think. Really, really old, but it works, right? A Tune 2 sign was kind of a last thought for me. I really hadn't done anything until the start of November for that, so I just needed to put something together. So I just created this quick frame out of just some offcuts of wood that I had lying around the house and painted it black. And behind it, you know, very simple, literally just a Raspberry Pi using HDMI into the TV, and I've just got a network cable and a power running out to the yard where that Tune 2 sits. So this is my other remote controller board. So this one's next to my theatre. Again, pretty much the same as the other one. One less F8 in there. So just got the remote expansion board, and then a couple of F8s, again a 5-volt power supply. So I run speakers out to my yard as well. You can see here I've got the cables, and again I just use that yellow chalk just to mark where the speakers are, the direction they face, just so their show can be in exactly the same position and everything laid out exactly the same night on night. And you can see that here with my chroma presence as well. You can see the couple of yellow dots. So this landscaping chalk should in theory hose off with a high pressure cleaner, or after about 30 days in the rain or elements. And we'll wait and see what happens with that. I hope so. You can see here I'm running my speaker from inside, so I've just got my 2 stereo cables coming out through there, and again another power cable, and I think that power cable's for the theatre remote distro board. So this is my mega tree. It's 5 meters tall. It's a flat tree actually, not really a traditional mega tree, but I had some limitations, right? So I didn't want to drill or put anything into the aggregate, and I wasn't really too keen on having guy wires, considering I've got quite a small yard. So what I've got is I've literally just got this wooden frame leaning against the top of the house there, and yeah, quite an effective design. It's actually based upon a design I saw by Renzo, I think it was, from the Australian ACL, Australian Christmas Lighting Community. Pretty much saw his and thought, yep, I'm gonna take one of them. And yeah, certainly probably been the centerpiece of my display. So you can see here I've just got a couple of bolts through the side of it supporting that frame there, and in the back I've just got some bracing, just some steel bracing, just to make sure that those joints really can't move, because wouldn't want this thing toppling down. So at the bottom I've just got some steel bar that I've just drilled holes into and used zip ties just to secure those Boscoyo strips to the bottom, with the same concept at the top as well. So just some steel bar at the top for everything to hang off, and then zip ties. You can see here that I haven't cut the zip ties off, and that's just because every couple of days I've had to come out here and tighten them, and it would just be a real pain if I kind of cut them off. So I don't know if it's just the weather we've had, you know, we've had consistent 40-degree days, but I've just had to come out and just tighten them each day, or each couple of days really. I've just used this bit of Coro here. Again, you can certainly see it's the end of the season and has started to weather, just to hide the wires. You know, kids don't really need to see that. And you can see up here, just roped to the house. I'll show you in a sec the other side, but what I've done is I've just put some D-bolts into the brick wall. So that's actually a blade wall, so on the other side I can actually just put some D-bolts on the other side, and just rope each side of the mega tree to the wall, so it's very, very stable. So the actual tree is 20 strips. I was originally going to make it 22, but you can see here really only just fits in on the left hand side, kind of almost tucks in under that gutter there, but the leg already is in the garden bed, and I didn't really want to go too far into the garden and have the pixels hidden by those trees and stuff there. So I just made it 20 strips, which I think's not a bad configuration. It looks really good. So they're zigzagged, so each strip or each strand goes up and loops back down. And I've got the power injection at the end of the second loop here. So you can see here, this is my 3-core going into this strip, going up, 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 and then comes down through here. And I've just got my 2-core injection cable coming off the other side. Probably got more cable here than I needed to have, so I've got 1 meter extension cords on them all. So next year what I think I'll do is just try to put some extra length on each of these mega tree strips, just so I can plug it straight into the controller, because it's a real mess at the moment. So this is one of my F16s. You can see there's been a fair bit of water and stuff on this, so standard it's pretty weatherproof. So this is one of my F16s. So this one here has 2 5-volt power supplies, one to each side of the board. So the first 8 ports all power the mega tree, and then those 2 F8s there power the mega tree as well. And the other side of the board is for everything else on the right hand side. So I think one of them is the mega tree star, as well as the candy canes down the side of this side of the house, as well as those perimeter pixels, as well as the other stuff that you see above. So these do have cooling fans. So this is the intake here, which doesn't have a fan on it, but the exhaust here sucks it, so it comes in through here and up, and that's where the 5-volt fans are. So that's, from what I've read, probably the best way of wiring it up. And no issues really. So I've monitored the temperatures on the F16s, and I haven't seen it go above 60 degrees. And that's usually at the start of the night when the sun's still out. So it really just goes down from there. You can see here the warping on some of these PVC outlines that I've got here. So I was trying to use as few silicone mounts as I could, just so I didn't have them hanging on the house all year round, although in theory the silicone should peel off. I had to, but next year I think I'm certainly going to have to put a few more silicone zip tie mounts just around the place, just to stop the stuff warping as the weeks go on. You know, the first couple of weeks was fine, there wasn't much movement at all, but by about week 3, you can see that one's moved, the one up there's moved, and even the one on the side of the house, which I think I showed you before, has just moved considerably. So you can see up here the outline going right around the house. It kind of goes right up there. That's all just one data line with multiple power injection runs through it. Again, all painted to match the house, so I didn't want it to stand out too much during the day. So yeah, painted all the PVC to match where it's going to go. So as I bring the display down, you might be able to see it there, that yellow tag on the end of it. I'm just going to label all of these as I pack everything away, so next year I know exactly where each piece is going to go, and it's not going to be a nightmare to set it all up again next year. Although it'd be really interesting, I think, to see what condition the conduit's in. So the sun comes in from this direction here in the afternoon, so it gets really hot every afternoon. So not quite sure what condition the conduit will be in. If I need to throw it away and drill it all again next year, that'll be quite a pain, but I'm hoping I can get a couple of seasons out of it just before I need to go and replace it all, because it was just a very repetitive job. So I had the whole display running at about 70% at the start of the season, but really it was too bright. You know, every time I tried to come out and take photos, they would just be out, and you know, if that's happening for me, it'll be happening for my visitors as well. So I ended up just deciding to run the whole show at 40%, and I think that's really a good balance. So at the start of the night, you know, when the sun's still up, I'm still toying with the idea of having it brighter, maybe, you know, 60%, and then really just lowering it back down to that 40% once the sun goes down. Because once that sun has gone completely down, you really don't need anything above 40% for it to look good, and especially if you want to take photos. You know, so I've got this street light literally right out the front of my house, so really because of that I was just under the impression that I'd need to have, you know, more brightness. So I designed the show to run at 80% for all my pixel power calculations. So obviously got a lot of room to move next year now that everything's going to be running at 40%. So I should be able to do some pretty considerable upgrades without any more power supplies. So I was fortunate to have a fair bit of structured cabling through the house. So what that allows me to do is run everything back to a central point. So we can see here, I've just got 2 network cables here. One of them goes to my F16 for the Megatree and the Tune 2 sign. So one of the things I didn't realise when I set it all up is that I could actually use the switch on the F16 and just daisy chain off the F16 to the Tune 2 sign, which would have meant that I didn't have to have an extra runner cable all that way, which is I think about 20 metres from the garage here out to the very front. So there's 2 power points there. One of those is for the Megatree, and one of those again is for the Tune 2 and Raspberry Pi that runs that. So we're in the theatre now, just behind Santa actually, and I've got everything running in through that window, just like I showed you before. So I've got the speaker cables there, as well as the power for one of the remote distro boards. So I just run all of the sound and AV, and actually the FPP player for the entire show from the theatre here. So you can see there my Raspberry Pi plugged into my home network with the amp that I run everything from, as well as the FM transmitter. Now all of that again, using that structured network cabling, means that I can have stuff all around the house and not have to worry too much about getting data everywhere, because I've kind of got points scattered throughout the whole house. So this is my comms cabinet for my house, quite messy. But what I've got here is, this is basically just my switch. So I've taken all the different ports around my house. So that's two from the theatre, 2 from the garage, 1 from the retreat, and just put all of that on a single switch, just to try to segregate all of that traffic off my home network. My modem actually has this thing called VLANs, where I can set up 2 different networks off one modem. So I've got like a 192.168.1 range, which is my home network, and it sets up a separate network called 192.168.2, and that just means I can have all of the traffic from one network, or my show network, not interrupting with the traffic from my home network, but they're bridged, so I can use my main PC and connect to all the show devices as if it were one network. Yeah, so I think that's called VLANs, which is pretty cool, having to actually have a physical, physically separated show network, which has made it easy to make changes all through the season, and also keep track of things, you know, like temps on the CPUs, etc. So I had a couple of issues with the Megatree through the season, nothing major, just a couple of pixels going out, and when I say going out, it was really only one colour had gone out, so the pixel didn't fail, but it's almost like one of the 3 LEDs just dislodged from the PCB, so I had to replace, I think it was only about 3 pixels all through December, which wasn't a huge issue. I could easily bring the strip down, so on the other side of the roof there, or the other side of that wall, is just a roof that I can stand on and actually reach the star. So it's actually quite easy to swap out the strips. A couple of times I did try soldering and putting in new pixels while the Megatree was up and the strips were up, but it's so much easier just to cut the whole strip down and put a new one up. So I think next year what I might try and do is have a couple of strips, you know, a couple of up strips and a couple of down strips just on hand, because often what I would do is at 6:30 at night, you know, my show starts at about 7 o'clock, is come out and test everything to make sure it works. And you know, it really adds a lot of time if you've got to do the soldering at that point in time. Whereas if I had a couple of spare strips, I could just replace the strips, get the show back up and running, so that it'd be a firm, you know, 6:55 or 7 o'clock start, and not actually risk running into the show time at all. So I'm going to start the teardown of this whole display tomorrow. So tonight's my last night. So tonight's the 30th, or today's the 30th of December. So I'll start the teardown tomorrow. I'm hoping all of this silicon, all these zip tie mounts, are going to peel off. If not, you know, they're probably okay to stay on a few more months and let them come off naturally. If they will, I haven't used this silicon on the render before, so I'm not quite sure how easy it will be to come off. But yeah, there's no holes drilled. Well, there's actually a few exceptions to that, such as on that there, but for the most part, everything is siliconed onto the house, or hammered into the ground, or placed on the ground. So we'll see how much of an issue teardown is tomorrow. So I'd just like to give a huge shout out to the Oz Christmas lighting community. So the 101 manual that they've developed is an immense source of knowledge. So I read that cover to cover at least a dozen times before I started doing anything. And you know, it's one of those things, right? It's like watching a really good movie. You know, you watch it once and you pick up, you know, the plot and the storyline, but watch it a few more times and there's just so many more details that you get that you didn't pick up on the first time you read the book. So the 101 manual is a very, very good read and imperative to the success of a Christmas lighting display. As well as all of the members on ACL, very, very good community that they've got there. And also from a Perth perspective, so we had our Perth Mini, I think it was in May, met some really good dudes there as well and caught up with quite a few of them just to talk about pixels and Christmas lights and help each other out. So huge shout out to Pierre, to Dale, and to Richard as well, who very kindly express posted me some remote distro boards when I needed them halfway through the season, because I had some issues with those. So really good group of people. Highly recommend getting into Christmas lighting. I'm happy to help out wherever I can if you've got questions or or comments or anything like that. Certainly would love to help you create an awesome display. Alright, thanks for watching. I'm going to sign off and start bracing myself to pull all this stuff down tomorrow.